So, Eric, take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this CoSA member webinar, America 250, a look at national plans and activities in North Carolina and Utah. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a welcome and an overview, and we'll have presentations with the national perspective, a presentation from North Carolina, a presentation from Utah, which will be followed by questions and answers, and then upcoming programs and webinars. So the Semiquincentennial of the founding of the United States is just around the corner. It's 4 years away. At the national, state, and local levels, history organizations, civic groups, and communities are advancing plans to commemorate American history for this momentous occasion. Many institutions have yet to get started. So today we'll listen to three individuals whose organizations are well on their way to this commemoration. So we're lucky to have with us today John Dichtl from AASLH, Lorraine Umfleet from the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and Jennifer Ortiz, the Director of the Utah Division of State History. John Dichtl has been AASLH President and CEO since 2015. Prior to that, he was the Executive Director of the National Council on Public History for 9 years and worked for the Organization of American Historians for 14 years as Deputy Director and in several other roles. He received his MA and PhD in Early American History from Indiana University, and from 2006 to 2015 was an adjunct faculty member of the History Department at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Before graduate school, he worked for the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. Lorraine Umfleet currently works with the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to develop outreach and specialty programming projects on behalf of the Secretary's office, including her latest project, which is coordinating the American 250th commemoration. Throughout her career in public history, she's worked with a multitude of sites in a variety of capacities, including the Office of Archives and History, the North Carolina Collection and Davis Library in Chapel Hill, the Joel Lane Museum House in Raleigh, and Historic Hope Plantation in Windsor. She served on the board of the directors for the North Carolina Museums Council, the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center, the North Carolina Preservation Consortium, the Historic Stagville Foundation, the Raleigh Heritage Trail, the Bertie County Arts Council, and is the historiographer for the Episcopal Diocese of Eastern North Carolina. And finally, we have with us Jennifer Ortiz. She was appointed in June 2021 as the Director of the Utah Division of State History. She comes to state history from the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, where she oversaw the State Museum Services Program that services Utah's 250 plus museums through workshops, museum technical assistance, site visits, and grant funding for the last 7 years. She also serves at the national level as a board member for the American Association for State and Local History and as a MAP mentor for the American Alliance of Museums. Prior to working with UDAM, Jennifer served as the collections manager of the Utah Museum of Fine Arts, managing an encyclopedic art collection of over 20,000 objects, in addition to roles at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the Boston Museum of Science, and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. She holds an MA in History and Museum Studies from Tufts University and certificates in Nonprofit and Change Management from the Getty Leadership Program through the Claremont Graduate University and University of Utah, respectively. Through her work, Jennifer is passionate about elevating underrepresented narratives to share a more complete history of our collective experience. So without further ado, we'll start with John Dichtl. John?
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. I'm honored to be here. Talking about the 250th is something that I've been doing for a number of years. ASLH has been trying to promote the idea of getting ready for it, and now, as Eric said, it's right around the corner. But hopefully, or there definitely is still time. There's definitely time to get things underway, to do some planning. There is a sense of urgency. It is around the corner. It is a once in a generation opportunity to get our fellow Americans to critically engage with history, I believe, and with a particular kind of history, a very relevant, inclusive history that I think has become the norm at a lot of historical sites and history organizations and archives across the country. As many of you know, ASLH is a national nonprofit association. It's a membership association. We try and provide leadership and resources to help the history community thrive and to make the past more meaningful for all people. And in many ways, what we're trying to do with the 250th is really accelerate our work that we are already doing, we already would be doing, trying to make history and history programming and history institutions more engaged, more inclusive, more relevant. Because of the sort of historical moment we are in, culturally and politically and socially, also hoping to get more Americans to use history as a way to think critically about the past and the present, and to perhaps be more civic minded as well. So I want to emphasize that idea of inclusion. I gotta get my slide. I gotta figure out my slides here. So for us, the way we're approaching the 250th is that inclusion, inclusive history, inclusive programming is really at its core. The Semiquincentennial really has to be about everyone, everywhere in every state and territory in this country. It's also an opportunity to present a vision of the past that is forthright and complete, one that encourages critical thinking and asks people to consider how lessons of the past can be used to help us continue on our journey of liberty and justice for everyone. And many members of our organizations, many of the partners that we're working with, and certainly the US Semiquincentennial Commission itself, share this very open and inclusive outlook, this broad definition of what counts as American history and what needs to be commemorated. So in terms of who's planning for this commemoration, I thought I would start with the America 250 Commission itself. So the commission was formed by Congress and signed by the president in 2016. The commission is made up of 8 members of Congress, 16 private citizens, and then I think about 9 ex officio heads of federal agencies. And the commission really sets the broad scope of what the commemoration goals are and what the commemoration is going to look like. And then the commission in turn created the America 250 Foundation, which is a separate nonprofit partner of the commission, and it provides the staff that actually carry out the wishes of the commission. So America 250 is really going to, in my further comments here, will really sort of stand in for both the commission and the America 250 Foundation. So it's really America 250 is the face of national planning right now. And they have been conducting national surveys, doing listening sessions, and various inclusion efforts since 2016. They've hired a number of staff. Some of those staff have left and been replaced. There's been some reorganization that's gone on. And they have continued to grow. America 250 has reached out to tribal organizations. It's reached out to all 56 states and territories and a host of other more local organizations and entities. So they've held webinars and listening sessions on topics like the forced removal of Native American people in US history, how Latino and Hispanic and Chicano communities are approaching the 250th, what the 250th is looking like from kind of the far-flung territories of the United States. So topics like that. America 250 has stated a commitment to make 2026 the most inclusive commemoration in American history. They're planning some national signature programs. They've introduced commemorative coin legislation in Congress. They're working with national partners like Major League Baseball and National Football League. And of course, they're working with major federal agencies, as I mentioned, like the Park Service, National Archives, National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Smithsonian. So you can get a sense of what they're up to. I think the best way to get a sense of what they're up to is to read the report. It's maybe, I don't know, 15 or 20 pages long, published in January of this year. I think that's very helpful. And right now, I understand that they're working on a America 250 playbook, which focuses on what they consider the core commemorative period of 2024 to 2026, which is very soon. I haven't seen that. I don't know what actually it looks like. I do know that America 250 is also getting ready this fall to to really get themselves more out in front of the news media and the American public. So they're calling that Discover America 250, and that's going to be an initiative to have lots of public events from coast to coast, particularly at the local level, to really get the idea of the 250th is coming, and get more people to realize that America 250 as an entity exists. Let's see. Oops, too many slides here. Well, we'll stick with this one. So America 250 has 12 advisory committees. I sit on one. I sit on the History Education Advisory Council. There are 11 others covering various topics. And these advisory councils provide ideas for programming, help the America 250 come up with criteria for judging programs that they might want to include eventually, and help connect America 250 to various national networks. This slide that you see in front of you is a map of the state commissions that exist so far. So there are, right now there are 29, I believe, state commissions that have been enacted in state legislation or by governor's offices. America 250 really is expecting this commemoration to be decentralized and for most of it to happen at the grassroots level, led by states, and so led by these state commissions. And they're hoping that each state and territory will create one of these commissions or some kind of similar lead group for coordinating and promoting locally. We're expecting the numbers to just take off. I think this year, just since January, I think maybe 12 or 15 of these have come online. I doubt that there will be any states left out by this time next year. I'm sure the whole map will be blue. And most of these state commissions, we've tried here at ASLH, we've tried to look at the enacting language at most of these, and most of it is good, and they're very different from state to state. There have been a couple cases where it's been a little bit troubling, and so I would encourage all of you to figure out what's going on in your state and have a look at how that commission is coming together and get involved if you're not involved. Most states, most of the states are taking that very broad, encompassing kind of inclusive approach that we really like to see. Pennsylvania is one of the first states. I think Pennsylvania and New Jersey were the first two states to have their commissions. In Pennsylvania, they're using history to encourage, inspire future leaders. They wanted to, quote unquote, spark an interest for the next generation and for people in Pennsylvania to use history to appreciate all the triumphs, trials, and tribulations that contributed to the Commonwealth. So a pretty inclusive perspective there. In New Jersey, they want to, quote, tell a diverse and inclusive story about America's past that invites participation from all New Jerseyans and to explore the history of the American Revolution and its legacy today. And then one other example I wanted to mention, in Alabama, the commission has a very clear charge to promote civic engagement and a mandate to, quote, teach students and increase public knowledge and appreciation of the breadth of American history and the centuries-long quest for liberty and justice for all. This includes sharing the stories and contributions of the various peoples who have populated the land, from indigenous peoples, explorers, British colonists, seekers of religious freedom, enslaved African Americans, and many others who are part of America's stories, unquote. So it's a beautifully broad, inclusive statement. So while America 250 is doing its work, these commissions are taking shape. My organization, ASLH, for more than 6 years has been encouraging people at all different levels to start planning and thinking about the 250th. Every quarter, ASLH has organized a 250th coordinating committee meeting. And this meeting is for representatives of about 30 national associations, including CoSA, several federal agencies, and some other state organizations that are involved. And so we get together every quarter, we just share information on what's going on. And we're trying to work the 250th really into every aspect of the programs and operations of ASLH. Including our annual meeting, Jennifer Ortiz, besides being a member of our board of directors, is also the co-chair for our annual meeting this year, which will be in Buffalo, New York. And it's that meeting is taking one of the 5 themes that I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes for the commemoration, and it's using that theme as the theme of our conference this year. So we've done a couple other projects I just wanted to run through quickly here. One is this National Census of History Organizations. So we did this not only to count for the first time very accurately as many of the history organizations in the country as we could, and do that in a very statistically and scientifically accurate kind of way. But we did that for the purpose of 2026 and the 250th, because we know that the bicentennial in 1976 had a huge effect on the number of history organizations. We know that a lot of local small history organizations, archives, museums, historical societies were launched in the few years leading up to the bicentennial and the few years after. Something like 30 to maybe as high as 40% of all the history organizations in the country by, say, early 1980s came about in those years surrounding the bicentennial. So we wanted to have an accurate count with this census. Another thing we've tried to do with the census, as I said, is just get a count of how many history organizations there are. And we suspected this, but we've proven to ourselves and to others that there are far more history organizations than have ever been counted before. You can see from this graphic here that there's more history organizations than there are public libraries, Starbucks, or McDonald's. And we learned in this research that if there was any doubt before, we know that history organizations are necessary and wanted, and they are really in every corner of the country. And as the quote says, they are astonishingly widespread and various in how they're shaped and in what they do. And so we're going to use future research to dig into that more. Another 250 related project is something we started about 4 years ago. It is the Reframing History Project, which we launched in February of this year. It was carried out in partnership with the Frameworks Institute in Washington, D.C. It was a 2-year deep dive research effort to understand for our field how we can communicate to the public what history is and why it matters to society. And so the results of that research are these 4 things, these 4 strategies that I want to suggest to you. And these are to make a major frame shift. And we're suggesting that our field, history and archives, museums, history museums, this frame shift we need to achieve together is to move the public focus away from thinking about a singular historical truth and something that is supposedly achieved by focusing only on the facts, just the facts, and instead get people to think about history as a critical engagement with the past. And we can do that in 4 ways, these 4 ways that are on the screen. So to talk about critical thinking, to shift perceptions about what history involves, compare historical interpretation metaphorically to detective work to deepen understanding of historical practice. And we tested several metaphors, and by far and away, detective work worked the best and was most useful in getting people to think about how history experts, people trained in history, or members of the general public who do a lot of history, how we're constantly revising our notion of the past. And people understand that detectives do that too. They're constantly revising what they know based on new information and new methods and new facts. And so that detective work metaphor performed the best. And then the third strategy was to emphasize how history makes progress towards justice. Helps people recognize the importance of history and history institutions. And this worked surprisingly across political ideologies. So from left to right, the many people who were in focus groups or were surveyed, the thousands of people surveyed for this research effort, that idea of moving toward justice worked for them. And then lastly, the 4th point, it's critical to use concrete location-specific examples of history solutions from history to get people to understand, to build support for an inclusive idea of history. In other words, it becomes hard for an individual to deny the agency or validity of another person or group in history if you are very specific about that person or that group's time and place and neighborhood and what they looked like and what they said. But when you talk in generalities, it's easy to dismiss groups and people from history. So these are pieces that are all really well researched and tested, and I urge you to visit our website if you want to learn more. You can read the full report, and there's a toolkit there. The last project I wanted to mention is, oops, there we go, is more about our plans for the 250th. It is this field guide, which I hope you've seen. We created this with funding from NEH. It includes 5 historical themes that we developed with a team of about or more than 24 scholars, public historians, museum professionals across the country. And these are historical themes and big ideas to give a sense of cohesiveness to the commemoration. And they offer points of entry for institutions of all types and sizes in all regions of the country. And even those that are far from the original 13 colonies or far from the Atlantic coast, we think that these themes give people everywhere in the United States and its territories a way to connect to the 250th. So we've mailed copies of this print guide to 21,000 people. It's available for free on our website as a PDF as well. These 5 historical themes are unfinished revolutions, which is the idea that America before, during, and after 1776, Americans were fighting for rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they have continued to do so ever since through a wide variety of ways, from grassroots organizing to boycotts to war, public debate, all kinds of methods. Power of place is a theme about thinking beyond and beneath underneath political and geographic boundaries, and to consider a fuller history of the spaces that we occupy. We the people is a theme about boundaries and national belonging, and who counts as a citizen, who is excluded in different times in the American past, and how have people been included. The American experiment is a theme about how the founders really understood that this was an experiment and they didn't have the perfect solution and they weren't sure if it was going to work. So it is a civic structure, a governmental structure that is always in process and constantly being changed through trial and error. And then the last theme is different than the other 4. It's more of a meta theme, kind of standing, taking a step backwards from these other themes and thinking about using our programs and our interpretation, our research, and our presentation of history to help the general public understand the work that we do as detectives, or however they want to understand it, but to sort of lift the curtain on our work so people see the processes, the methods, the assumptions, and so that they can see that it involves critical thinking and historical thinking. So I hope you'll use these 5 themes, and again, they're on our website. I want to end with a few final thoughts about the 250th. So some of you probably lived through the bicentennial like I did, and you know that it's often been caricatured as being about fireworks and tall ships, or bicentennial quarters, or American flag trinkets. But there was truly a transformational moment in the bicentennial. We know that in the mid-1970s and after the bicentennial, there was a huge flood of interest in the American story, big interest in genealogy. The book Roots came out, millions of Americans watched that. There was a lot of, as I mentioned before, a lot of small history organizations were created in the wake of the bicentennial. New archival collections were started. And there was the emergence of the public history movement in the academy. There are now something like 170, 180 master's programs in the United States in public history. And so that all came out of the bicentennial. So one of the questions I would leave with you, and I think about here from time to time, is what do we want to make of the 250th? What kind of big step forward for our community of history practitioners archivists, historians, public historians, museum curators, and others. What kind of new methods or approaches or new audiences will we leave for ourselves for the next 50 years? And this really is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Can't stress that enough. We're not going to get a reset. We're not going to get a few extra months to do this planning. And I look forward to working with you over the next 4 years and seeing what we can get done. So thank you for listening.
Well, hello. God, I'm unmuted. You can hear me, right? Great.
Yes.
I'm Lee Ray Umfleet. I'm with the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and we are a huge entity here in North Carolina. We're a state agency that reports to the governor, and we have everything from the arts and nature through to aquariums in the zoo and the state archives. And you name anything that's fun in North Carolina, we probably have a toe in it. So we are taking a huge approach to the commemoration, and some of the things are going to echo what John spoke to about what ASLH is doing and what the National A250 organization is doing. But we've taken it and tweaked it just a little bit to make it more North Carolinian, if you can imagine that. So as John was saying, I won't repeat much about what the America 250 project is, but where our involvement comes in is that there's regular meetings of the various states and even regional meetings of the states to discuss what regions can do and how states can approach the commemoration. We began planning back in 2018, and then we had a draft for activities by 2019, and the governor recognized our agency and charged us with overseeing the, I think my thing is on automatic advance, so sorry for that. But Governor Cooper recognized our agency as the place that would be best used for facilitating the commemoration. And we work alongside a large stakeholders committee. And some of our goals and thematic approaches are going to be where my presentation will give you some information and some ideas, I hope. We're seeking ways to involve groups across North Carolina because the commemoration can mean many different things to the diversity of our state's residents. We will begin our commemoration in Halifax. And we've chosen Halifax because that is the site of the Halifax Resolves. In 2024, we will begin at Halifax. And the activity at Halifax back in 1776 in April was the first official action by a colony calling for the severance of ties to Britain. The town was then a major site for militia musters and major supply depot. And we saw enlistments of American Indians and free people of color for the Continental Line in Halifax. So Halifax is our starting point in 2024, and we'll move forward with more activities as things progress along the timeline. We have not just themes, but we also have two broad concepts that we're looking through and for in our programming. First is Revolutionary North Carolina. The historical events of the Revolution in North Carolina are an incubator for revolutions in thought, history, and technology. And this is where we'll also focus on that pure military history of the Revolution. But we also have this other creative aspect, this when are we us? And that's where we explore the concepts of freedom, civic responsibility, overcoming challenges, and leaning into the ideals of democracy. And through these two themes and two pillars of our approaches to our commemoration, we have other sub-themes. So our first one is visions of freedom. And the American Revolution was the beginning of a continual journey for North Carolinians to seek true freedom. And this conceptual theme is that of making and remaking America through visions of freedom. The revolution of the 18th century was the start of a continuous process for North Carolinians seeking to envision true freedom. Here we will be able to highlight movements that created a better version of our state and nation. Concepts of the civil rights movement, women's suffrage, even scientific and industrial developments, have grown who and what we are as North Carolinians, pushing for the promises of the revolution. We can also explore the decisions and choices of revolutionary leaders in their space, as well as those who made choices based upon individual hopes and dreams of freedom. We also have this other theme called a gathering of voices. This commemoration is not one that can be told through one voice or one experience. Historic voices and stories will inspire others, and we want all voices heard in the narrative of our collective history. This thematic concept also opens avenues for the arts, protest movements, and will allow for highlighting our various leaders whose voices gave our state its diverse, sometimes controversial, and sometimes enlightened uniqueness. Common ground. Places carry our stories of struggle, creation, and connection. All North Carolinians should recognize that we are students of history, yet we're witnesses too, but we are also makers of history. Our spaces of reverence, battlefields, historic sites, the natural world can be places of happiness, painful moments, evidence of struggle, rebirth, and growth, yet all carry our stories of collective struggle, creativity, and humanity's relationships to one another. We come together on common ground to find connections and ways to make our state a better place. We have a plan for a robust outline and social media campaign online to share news of the activities for both DNCR and those of our stakeholder partners. I encourage you to visit the website. I'll drop the link into our discussions in a little bit. And another tool that we have is a robust calendar that our partners can post events to. And we also have a learning guide for people, much like the one that AASLH developed. We seek to have a balanced commemoration to empower North Carolinians to consider what the concepts of democracy, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness mean both historically and for modern day residents. We hope to work with communities across the state to ensure that all tools and resources we are developing will be widely available. One piece we released recently is that toolkit. It includes logos, event planning tools, and future editions will contain downloadable, customizable mini exhibits and press kits for our partners. The commemoration, as I said, will launch in 2024. We have our major focus on 2026. And in that year, we will encourage all 100 counties and as many organizations as possible to host a 250 themed event at some point in the year, perhaps associated with annual celebrations, festivals, or community events. We'll be working with these communities in the coming year to find opportunities to commemorate the 250th in ways that best reflect local identity, culture, and history. Even though it seems as 2026 is far off, now is the time to work through the planning process for communities to discover the most effective ways to commemorate the Revolutionary War and its legacy. It can be as simple as reading the Declaration of Independence at your courthouse steps on the 4th of July, or as complex as a festival or exhibit at the town hall. We're here to help our communities find the best ways to do these. As I've said, and this is a very important point for us, this commemoration is not one that can be told through one voice or one experience. Historic voices and experiences of North Carolinians will serve to inspire us and others to guarantee that all voices are heard. Our goal is for all North Carolinians to see themselves in our commemoration and appreciate its relevance. To improve the understanding of the Revolutionary era, for example, we're looking at a variety of documents again with a critical eye in our state archives. For example, this treaty between the Cherokee and the Crown from 1759 essentially ceded from the Cherokee what is mostly modern day West Virginia in order to open the area to white settlers. Not only does this document found in our archives give us insight into the loss of Native American lands, it also shares the names of 15 tribal representatives, which in the past, in 1976, that wasn't necessarily something that was seen as useful information. As I said earlier, DNCR is a broad agency. We're stretching across all aspects of natural sciencey, history, preservation-y divisions to have a cohesive approach. And one of our groups is the State Historic Preservation Office, and they're working to identify endangered battlefields and other areas of importance. And we're doing archaeology and other activities to identify these regions where this important activity took place. And North Carolina, just a quick history lesson. We had a whole lot of action in the Revolutionary War at the beginning of the war and at the end of the war. So our commemoration will span about 10 years. So that's job security for me. Early action, both in the mountains and on the coast, and then in the center part of the state by the middle point of the war. And towards the end of the war and the Southern campaigns with General Greene and Cornwallis and everyone marching all over Eastern North Carolina and Western North Carolina, you see more activity taking place. And finally, my cats are getting in on it too. Ethan and Floof and all the folks in North Carolina are gonna be wearing funny clothes and enjoying and celebrating what it means to be a North Carolinian. Thank you so much for letting me have a few moments to tell you about North Carolina. I'm gonna turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Lorraine. I hope everyone can hear me now. I am going to, let's see, can I advance the slides? Here we go. I'm here to talk to you about our project here in Utah. So just by way of introduction again, my name is Jennifer Ortiz and I am the director for the Utah Division of State History. We are Utah's state historical organization responsible for documenting all of Utah's history. And so our organization includes library and collections, our public history team and outreach, education and engagement, and in addition to that, developing new scholarship through things like our Utah Historical Quarterly. So today I'm going to be talking to you about our 250th project called The Peoples of Utah Revisited. And so to give a little bit of background, oh, let's see. There we go. So what is the Peoples of Utah Revisited? So this is a multi-year initiative that our state historical agency has taken on to recognize, document, and celebrate our diverse communities that reside in Utah and shape the state. This is a two-pronged approach through both scholarship and community history, with the major goals being to gather undertold and untold stories from across the state, really amplifying marginalized voices that have not been heard and documented in the past, and to preserve the state's history through representative archives and collections, which will ultimately include a public-facing online resource in 2026 and filter up and into and through the Museum of Utah, which is our state's first state history museum, which is set to open in 2026. So why are we looking at Peoples of Utah Revisited as a project? And really, our answer to that is pretty simple. We are, of course, first and foremost, a Western state. So unlike the East Coast, celebrating 250 looks a lot different for us. You know, John Dichtl's comments about how we be more inclusive in our approach, really, that's something that we feel here in our bones in Utah. Of course, in 1776, parts of the state were Mexico. We have a deep indigenous history here. And so for us, celebrating Utah 250 is about celebrating who we are as Utahns today and acknowledging how we got here through the legacy and history of the people who've made the state. We do have a established statewide 250 commission that our agency is supporting and that our, the state history division will be a part of. But the Peoples of Utah Revisited initiative really presents us with the unique opportunity to be more inclusive in our approach as we look to 2026 and really continue to build a wider lens as we do more representative history work throughout the state. And finally, the Peoples of Utah Revisited is a legacy project. It builds off of a bicentennial project that was published in 1976 called The Peoples of Utah by Helen Papanicolaou. And so I want to talk just a little bit about her. A little bit about her because her legacy is really important to us here in Utah. She was a daughter of Greek immigrants, born and raised in Carbon County, Utah, and in a rural mining town. And this was something that really shaped her lived experience as both a person and a writer. It really gave her insight into the feeling of otherness. And that's something that she really used to help develop and to document ethnic minority and religious minority groups across Utah. Prior to 1976, she was documenting Greek communities in Utah, and with the 1976 project, was awarded the opportunity to edit and compile the book, The Peoples of Utah. She was somebody who really approached this work in an organic way, really knew how to ask the right questions of community groups, and is credited with documenting the first documented history of ethnic communities across our state. And so this is a big legacy project for us, and it's one that we can really look to the bicentennial, what we did as a state, and build off of it for 250. So the original Peoples of Utah project, as I mentioned, it was a 1976 bicentennial legacy project, was responsible for documenting both ethnic and religious diversity across the state between the mid-1800s through the 1970s. And this is just a list of some of the communities that are represented within the Peoples of Utah book. She was somebody who was always a champion of these narratives and a big proponent of documenting diverse communities across our state. This is just a map, an image of what Carbon County looked like in 1920, just the racial and ethnic makeup. This project was really important in dispelling misunderstood information about Utah. Utah was actually pretty diverse in the early 1900s and continues to be so today, despite what people may think sort of in the national sphere. At one point in 1920, over 20 languages were spoken in Carbon County alone. It was a rural mining town that saw a lot of immigration come to that part of the state, and people still have roots and legacies built into these communities to this day. And that is something that Helen was responsible for documenting. And so really the legacy and the impact of the Peoples of Utah was massive. It was something that really allowed the foundation for diversity in teaching and scholarship on Utah's history, ethnic studies in the state, and activated new scholars and community efforts to document untold Utah history out of that project. And I think a lot of legacy 1976 bicentennial projects kind of show us that people were really interested in telling their story and their history, and really inspired scholars from across not only our state, but across the country to participate in bicentennial projects. And so that is something that we are going to be building off of here with our new project. Oops. Sorry, let me back up just a little bit. This is a snapshot of our collections database. One of the biggest legacies, I would argue, is the collections that we were able to absorb as part of the Peoples of Utah project. And so here you're just seeing a snapshot of our photograph collection, and this is a slide of some of the photographs from that collection. As a result of Helen Papanikolaou's work and the historians that she worked with, we were able to absorb community collections, significant community collections that to this day are used for research purposes and exhibitions, text, research, all, you name it, it's used across the state. And so this is something that is a huge legacy of the project. Here we have an image of a coal camp boss, Nagaki, and his family. Again, a family and a community that existed in Utah and still has roots to today. And of course, we have documentation of our Spanish-speaking population here in Utah, a lot of those whom were Mexican, Mexican-American, and Spanish. So looking ahead for us for 2026, this is something that really inspired us to think about what are we going to do for the 250th. And for us, it meant that we really had the opportunity to truly build off of Helen Nicholas's work and legacy. A lot has changed in the state since 1976. You know, like many other states, the demographics are changing. Communities are rapidly shifting. As you can see by this graph that's on the right-hand side, the Utah projected minority demographics are set to increase at a pace with the rest of the country. So while, of course, not as diverse as the rest of the country, it's seeing significant increases. The Peoples of Utah Revisited is coming at a perfect time for us to help document these shifts and to really allow our state agency to be truly representative of the people in Utah and to help rectify some oversights from the original Peoples of Utah. We had many communities not represented in that 1976 publication, and we're hoping to have the opportunity to go back and fix that. Communities such as tribal nations that were not at the time federally recognized were excluded. And so we take that as an opportunity to make sure that we're going to document that and make sure that that gets published within our Peoples of Utah Revisited project. So what does this look like? I know I talked a lot about sort of big ideas, but this looks like quite a bit of things for us. As I mentioned earlier, we are taking a two-pronged approach to this project. The first prong is investing in scholarship from both established and up-and-coming and non-traditional voices in the history sector. We are committed to this work by financially paying for people's time and expertise and working with hubs across the state through the university and college systems to cultivate scholars, not just from Salt Lake Valley, but from the entire state, both rural and urban. The second prong is community history, and this is the piece of the puzzle for state history that is going to be the one that we're spending a big chunk of time to develop because it's not a program we currently yet have. It's going to focus mostly on non-academic spaces and to really elevate the overall significance of community history to be on par with scholarship. So for us, that looks like, it looks like a lot of different things. We are working with community groups and other statewide agencies to plan and host events such as scanning and digitization events, family-held collections, things like recipes, photos, art, and other ephemera. We're designing events such as memory workshops that are responsive to communities that we are working with and reliant on community building rather than the extraction model that a lot of projects such as these tend to rely on. We're also planning on hosting preservation workshops, preserving family collections, and co-creating archival and artifact collections through a catch and release methods that don't remove items from a family's possession, but rather helps us document them and then be able to provide access to others in the future. So really, in essence, we aim to amplify undertold and untold histories from communities across the state and be the facilitators and not the owners of these narratives. So we do have some deliverables that are both tangible and intangible. So some of the deliverables that we'll be seeing in 2026 include a themed Utah Historical Quarterly. And so this is going to be a year-long publication of a peer-reviewed journal that we run within our agency. And this is where all of our scholarship will be sort of filtered up and out into. And so this is something that is available both in print and online and will contribute to future research efforts. We'll also have a website landing page with portals to new collections and to research, in addition to all of our community projects that will be done across the next 4 years. We'll also have opportunities to have the scholarship that's been developed as a pipeline to the Museum of Utah, which, as I mentioned before, is set to open in 2026. So another nod to the 250th. For us, the biggest thing here with the Peoples of Utah Revisited initiative are the intangible deliverables. Really, the focus here is to develop organic and meaningful relationships with ethnic, religious, and other community groups that haven't been historically connected to the Utah Division of State History. We, like many other historical societies, have alienated groups over the years and have not been as inclusive as we can be. in making sure that we're telling the full Utah story. And so this is an opportunity to rectify those relationships and build bridges. And that's something that I and our team is very keen on doing. Another intangible, of course, is to make sure that our state agency is fully representative of the population of our state, kind of a nod to, again, those changing demographics and making sure that we are documenting a fuller history. So that was the Peoples of Utah Revisited, and thank you so much for letting me share a little bit about our projects.
Thank you, Jennifer. So this, for participants who are here, this is your time to ask our panelists questions. So we still have a few minutes, probably about 7 minutes. So does anybody have any questions for the panelists? I'll prime the pump. So what do each of you consider your greatest challenge in commemorating the 250th?
Time.
We've already started going out and doing face-to-face events to try to get the grassroots knowledge of what 2026 is. And we don't try to say it's semi-quincentennial as much as we should, but we are saying it's the 250th. And a lot of people are apathetic about democracy and our American experience sometimes. And then others are like, huh, oh yeah, that's coming up. Cool. And then they just keep going. So I think that's going to be one of our challenges, is to get people enthusiastic about this, what we're trying to do. We're working very hard to have a wide variety of programs and activities to reach a wide variety of constituents. So hopefully we'll get a few involved and interested.
Jennifer, do you see any great challenges being from the West? And
of course, just making that connection to the larger national conversation. I think this is where AASLH has done a fantastic job with the field guide. We've really been able to run with that as an entity, and across the state. We've been really using that as the model to host conversations. For us, with Peoples of Utah Revisited, really the challenge is, how do we ensure ongoing and continued support of an inclusive narrative? And that's the challenging piece of the puzzle. In a state like Utah, it can be difficult, frankly. And so we have to make sure that the work that we're doing is supported, but also it's grassroots. It's not the state agency doing this work, it's community groups doing this work.
And then one other quick question, and this is something we've debated in South Carolina a great deal, because the commemoration in South Carolina is going to last through 2033, because the British didn't abandon Charleston until 1782. So can each of you talk about your organization and when you think that your efforts will be complete in regards to commemoration?
Yeah, so I'll go first, I guess. So we're increasingly thinking beyond 2026, and we realize that, like, for example, in planning our annual conference for 2026, it will be in probably September, like it usually is. And at that point, the commemoration activities really will have crested everywhere. You know, July 4th is probably the peak moment. But the 250th of the Constitution then starts to come into view. And I think people, as we get closer to 2026, people will be talking about the 250th anniversary of that moment increasingly. And also in 2026 itself, at that annual conference in September, we realized that most of our members are going to be in a pretty celebratory mood. All their hard work will have been done, and it will be a time to kind of enjoy and take in other people's hard work for the commemoration. But then we will be thinking about those questions I was trying to raise at the end of my presentation of what comes next for the field. And maybe that's looking inward a little more, not so much about how what do we need to do with and for the general public, but as archivists, as museum people, as historians, are there opportunities to set ourselves up for a better, stronger, brighter more inclusive, more relevant future as professionals. So we'll be thinking more about that. So it, you know, I know our work is not going to slow down when we get to 2026. It's going to just shift slightly to thinking about the future of our profession and thinking about the Constitution. And I think civics, just in the last year, civics and history have just become so integrated and united in our thinking here at ASLH. And I see lots of other organizations doing this too. And so that civics piece is only going to be more important by the time we get to 2026, which is also another reason to think beyond.
North Carolina, we are beginning in 2024, a huge focus on 2026, but given the scope of the history of the revolution, we will continue until 1782, 83, so 2032, 33. Beaufort, North Carolina was sacked by the British about 2 months after their surrender at Yorktown because they didn't get the memo. And so we've got to continue that discussion. We won't be as laser focused on what the revolution or war is about, or some of the other activities related to the 250 that you'll see in 2026, but we will still have these thematic approaches and these activities taking place throughout the remainder of the Revolutionary War timeline. And we'll also intervene with the when are we us concepts of diversity and leaning into the ideals of the democracy that we have, and are we there yet? Are we done? And challenging our folks to consider those questions and what they can do as citizens of our state and nation to help move us forward. That's civics education, not just for students in the classroom, but for adults out in the world in North Carolina. I mean, we are the ninth largest state, and we have a lot of territory to cover. So it's going to keep us busy.
There's no end for us, right? 2026, we're using the 250th to really connect us to the national conversation in a meaningful way as a Western state. But really, we're hiding the work that we wanted to do anyway, embedded within 250. Telling a more inclusive history of Utah was always work we were going to do. This just presents us a really great opportunity to push forward funding, to write grants, and to really ensure that we feel connected to a national movement. The piece of this puzzle for us, and to what John was speaking about earlier, is investing in young up and coming scholars, historians, museum professional archivists. This is our opportunity to engage a whole new generation of people who may not have had their voices heard before, now be invested in this work and in this community. And that's something that I am really keen on and moving forward to help support that. So the answer to that is our work is never done, but 2026 is an exciting commemoration for us to mark with sort of these deliverables that I talked about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. John Dichtl, Lorraine Umflett, and Jennifer Ortiz, thank you so much on behalf of the CoSA Board of Directors for participating in today's webinar. We look forward to seeing all of the participants in future webinars, and I'll turn it over to Lisa Johnston now for some quick announcements.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for all presenters, John, Jennifer, and Lorraine. We appreciate that presentation. Hopefully get a lot of us thinking about this topic. And if our state's not one of those that's already got started, where do we get started and what do we need to do? So I think it was a great presentation. I just want to take a couple minutes and remind you that if you enjoyed today's webinar, we hope you'll keep joining us monthly for webinars. August, we're not sure what we're going to do yet, but I can tell you that September, we have a presentation by an organization called enslaved.org. So we're going to learn a little bit more about what they have to offer. And so that'll be our one. Our SERI, our electronic records community, has monthly webinars as well. They take the summer off. So be watching, and the fall schedule will be coming soon. So you'll have an opportunity to check in with them and follow their webinars as well. What we do have starting up in August is we give our sponsors an opportunity to talk to our CoSA membership about work that they are doing. It's not a sales pitch, but allow them an opportunity to share what they're working on. So in August, we have 2 shop talks coming up. So they'll look for the registration, and you'll be able to sign up and find out. And this is a really great opportunity. Maybe you're not ready for some of the products they might offer, and maybe you're just starting to investigate, but it's a great way to learn about what's out there and maybe find out, yeah, that's something we could use, or gosh, that's really nothing we're ever going to use. And then surprisingly, 5 years later, you go, I remember this product. So anyway, we hope you'll take a chance to look at that, and then get connected with us. There's lots of different ways. We've got lots of different opportunities, so we hope you'll do that. And lastly, we have to thank our sponsors and funders. Without them, CoSA would not be the vital organization that it is. So thank you out for all of them. And thank you all for attending today. We appreciate your attention and time. We know your time is valuable, but take just a couple more minutes and help us. There's going to be a link to a webinar evaluation, and let us know your thoughts, because that really does help our education committee as they're trying to plan and develop new topics, and what works and what doesn't work, and what would you like to hear about. So please take that time and do that. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our presenters today. Eric, thank you for being our moderator. And attendees, thank you all for coming today. We'll see you all at the next CoSA webinar. Take care. Have a great day.